The Linux directory structure. In this lecture, I'm going to cover the Linux directory structure. We will go over each directory that is set up in Linux and understand what is it used for. I will go over each directory one by one based on how important they are. But before we dive into the directory structure, it is important to know why it exists and design the way it's designed. Regardless of which operating system you use, be it Windows or Linux or any other operating system, there is a directory structure in place. For example, imagine going to a library and looking for a particular book. Now imagine none of the books are divided by sections and are just sitting there in no particular order or structure. It will make it almost impossible for you to find a book. That's why there are different sections, categories, and an order of how books are arranged in the library. Makes it easier for you to find a book. Similarly, Linux directory structure exists so that your system can do things easier and more efficiently. It knows where to look for. For example, when your system boots up, it knows which directory and file it needs and where to look for it to boot more efficiently. Linux follows a file system hierarchy standard, also known as FHS. The root file system is the top level file system in the FHS and contains many higher level directories holding specific information, but everything starts at root. The directory separator in Linux is symbolized by a /. Root is often referred to as /. If someone tells you to look for a file under /, they're referring to the root directory. First directory that we are going to talk about is the boot directory or /boot. One of the most important directories we have in the list is /boot. Boot directory contains configuration files which are used by the bootloader. Every time your system boots up, the first thing it looks for is the boot directory. This file system also contains the Linux kernel. It also contains boot support files and boot configuration files such as grub.cfg. Next is the root directory /root, not to confuse it with /. This is the default home directory for the root user, which is the super user. When you log on to your system as root user, your current directory is root, which is also the default home directory for the root user. Next we have is the /dev directory. This directory contains information about your system devices, such as disk, mouse, CD, speakers, flash drive, keyboard, etc. Any of these peripheral devices that are attached to your Linux system are created as a file, and they will show up in /dev directory. /dev directory also contains information about your hard disk drives, optical drives, parallel printers, etc. Next is the etc directory, most commonly referred to as etc. etc is also one of the most important directories in the Linux file system. It contains all the configuration files. Configuration files control how your operating system or the applications behave. For example, there's a configuration file in /etc that tells the operating system whether to boot into a text mode or into a graphical mode. When you need to make configuration changes to your DNS, sendmail, NTP, or NFS, this is where you will find all their configuration files. Make sure to create backups before making changes to these configuration files in /etc to avoid any issues. Next is /bin directory. In the newer versions of Linux, /bin has been changed to /user/bin, or it's been linked to /user/bin. And it's where you will find binary files or executable files. It is the directory where everyday user commands are stored, like ls, pwd, mv, rm, etc. Next is /sbin directory. In the newer versions of Linux, /sbin has been changed to /user/sbin, or has been linked to /user/sbin. It contains system and file system related commands such as fdisk, gpart, makefs, mkfs, lvextend, etc. For example, when you extend your file system or configure your file system, this is where the relevant commands are stored, so you can use these and get the job done. Next is /opt, the optional file system. As the name suggests, /opt holds additional software installed on the system, a subdirectory is created for each installed software. It is mostly the software which does not come with your operating system. It contains additional add-on applications that are not part of the OS. For example, Google Maps is not part of the standard Linux operating system, so Google Maps gets installed in /opt. So basically this is where all the third-party software resides. Next is /proc. It runs processes that only exist in memory. This file system maintains info about the current state of the running kernel, CPU, and memory. It also contains info related to disks, partitioning, file systems, networking, and running processes. The /proc system is automatically managed by the system. Contents in /proc are created in memory at boot time, updated during runtime, and destroyed at boot time again. When you shut down your Linux operating system, all that stored information is erased. And next is /lib directory. In this new version of Linux, /lib has been changed or linked to /user/lb. This is where all the C program library files that are needed for commands and applications is stored. It contains library routines required by many commands, programs, as well as the kernel. Next is /tmp directory, the temporary file system. Often referred to as the temp file system, this is where you will find all the temporary files. /temp stores temporary files used by many programs. The contents of this file system are automatically deleted when your system reboots. So all the temporary files get deleted when the system reboots. Next is /home, the home file system. This file system holds user home directories for each user. Each user, in most cases, will have their home directory. For example, /home/user, whatever user that you created. For example, if you created a user called Kashif, it will be under /home/Kashif. Next is /var, the variable file system. The /var directory contains files holding status, logs, spools, and other dynamic data, but more importantly, error logs. If you're troubleshooting any issues, this is where you will find all the relevant logs to help you troubleshoot that issue. Important subdirectories are var log /var/log. This is where most system log files such as system logs, boot logs, failed user logs, installation logs, even cron logs, and all relevant logs when you're troubleshooting are stored here. So if you're troubleshooting an issue with your system, user login failure, or system boot issues, this is where you will find the relevant information. Next under /var is opt. It keeps logs for any additional software that was installed in /opt. Next is /var/spool. It holds print jobs, cron jobs, mail messages, and other queued items. These items are held and located before they're sent out. Another directory we'll cover under var is temp, tmp, /var/tmp, temporary files that need to exist for longer periods of time as opposed to what is allowed in /tmp are stored here. These files can survive reboots unlike /tmp and are not automatically deleted. Next is /run directory. The /run is supposed to be a tempfs, tmpfs, a temporary file system. It's mounted during early boot process, available to store info for all your tools at any time during the boot up. System daemons that start early in the boot process, such as systemd and udev, use /run to store runtime files such as PIDs or process ID files. Next is /mnt directory. This directory is used to mount file system temporarily. If nothing is mounted on your existing file system, then you can use /mnt to mount an external file system to it, such as NFS. Next is /media. This directory is used by the system to automatically mount removable media, such as floppy, CD, DVD, USB, and zip drives. If you have a CD drive attached to your computer, you pop the CD and you close it. Most likely you will see it under /media. Next is /srv. Some Linux operating systems use /srv as a location to store data that is used by the Linux server. For example, if you have a web server, so web server files would be in /srv/www. Or let's say if you're using an FTP server, the files may be located in /srv/ftp directory. Let's move on to the last one we'll cover. It's not part of the standard. It's /user/local directory. I just wanted to cover this because there's a lot of applications that are not shipped with the operating system. These are the ones that usually get installed in /user/local as well. We've already covered /opt where they get installed, third-party software gets installed, but /user/local is also some place where your operating system does not install applications that are not shipped with the operating system are typically installed in /user/local as well as the OPT.